Hello and welcome to this video. Now before we get into your exercise routine, first off we're going to discuss the difference between locomotion and exercise, what these two different things are, and how we must approach both of them to create an effective movement practice that improves our posture and our overall movement potential to reduce injury risk and get the most out of our movements. So let's start with locomotion here. So locomotion is basically those fundamental movement patterns I discussed in the introductory video. Things like walking and running and jumping and climbing. Basically movements that involve getting our body from A to Z, or one point to the other. So this requires stability of our joints, this requires spatial awareness of our surroundings, and also full body coordination. So from our toes to our fingertips to our head, everything is coordinated and working in unison. Now exercise is generally a stationary movement, and it involves targeting a specific area of the body. So the most common example would be something like a bicep curl to improve the strength of our bicep muscles in our arms, or something like a chest press to increase the strength of certain muscles in our upper torso. Things like that can be classified as an exercise. So now let's discuss the approach to improving both locomotion and exercise, and how the common approach is potentially causing us injuries. So with locomotion, these movements should be efficient, controlled, and they should improve our posture. This can go from the most basic locomotive patterns right up to elite athletic performances. So if we are moving in locomotion efficiently, we should be controlling our posture and understanding these movement patterns. As we are in a constant relationship with gravity, if we can stack our body from our head to toe efficiently, we can mitigate these forces of gravity and become more efficient movers. Now the problem here comes in the form of compensatory movement patterns and accumulative damage. So I'll explain what both of these mean. So basically every area of our body has a specific list of functions and a specific role that it must perform. Now when all areas of our body are functioning correctly, our body can move in unison. It can move with control and efficiency, and that full body coordination is optimized. Now as soon as one area of our body becomes inefficient and the functions are neglected, another area of the body has to compensate, these are the compensatory patterns, to perform the role that this other area is not performing effectively. So a very common example would be our hips, our pelvis area, like our big glute muscles, all of the other muscles involved in that area. If they are not functioning correctly, then something else has to compensate. So often we'll run into knee injuries or lower back injuries as a result of our hips not functioning correctly. Now this creates a snowball effect where one area isn't working properly, another area has to compensate, and then another area again has to compensate for this other area, and the list just goes on and on and on, creating this chain effect of areas having to make up for lack of movement. So our body needs to work as a team. Everyone needs to play their role. So let's talk about how exercise can play into this role to improve our locomotion and our overall movement capacity. So if we use exercise to focus on the range of motion, the ROM, R-O-M, range of motion, and the functions of each area of the body, then we can improve our locomotion. So I'll give another area of the body an example. Let's take the shoulder joint. So this is a multi-directional joint that involves many functions. And one of the main functions stemmed from our ability to throw an object. So if we are focusing purely on building muscle through exercise, we are limiting this range of motion. So if we're looking at building big shoulder muscles and we do things like a shoulder press and we might lift some dumbbells out to the side, we are only focusing on a couple of these functions of the shoulder. Now if we neglect the other functions and all of the multi-directional capabilities of that area, then something else has to compensate for not respecting these functions. The same thing goes for the hips. They are multi-directional. If all we're doing is leg pressing and squats and these very basic movements to build these aesthetic muscles, those movements are all good and well, but if we neglect the other functions, we run into problems. So how do we approach all of this and bring it all together? We must begin by respecting the anatomy and the physiology that makes up the uniqueness of the human body. So when we can respect these functions of each area of the body, make sure they're working correctly, and then integrate them into these full body locomotive patterns to optimize our locomotion, we are in a much better state. We have built our foundations and we can then branch out from there to achieve specific goals. But we must start with this foundation first, and it simply takes out the guesswork. If we know each area of the body is playing its part, the functions are working correctly, and we are aware of our posture, whether it's walking, whether it's running, like I said, right up to elite movement patterns that are involved in athletics and sports. Whatever end of the spectrum you are on, you can always focus on improving these functions and get the most out of your movement practice. So with that being said, in the next video, we're going to go over a basic exercise routine that respects some of the functions of the body, of the human body rather, and this will help you improve the most fundamental locomotive movement pattern, establishing a foot to hip connection and getting more out of your movement practice. So I'll see you in the next video. We'll go through these exercises and then we'll carry on and discuss more important topics on how to approach nourishing your body every single day. So I'll see you there. Cheers.